So there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think we can all agree on that, especially when it comes to politics and everything going on right now. There's a lot of misinformation. It's hard to know who to really trust. And I think before we figure out what's really going on with politics, we have to figure out what's going on with existence first, right? How can we understand what's happening with politics if we don't even understand what's happening with existence altogether? And I think there's a lot of lies and manipulations about what's going on with existence, too. And so we really need to question everything we're told about what existence is. Whether this is from the school system, the mainstream academic perspective, the mainstream science perspective, or the mainstream religious perspective, or any other perspective. We need to question it and try to get down to a fundamental understanding of figuring out what's really going on. This is the key we have to do. To get down to a fundamental understanding and rooted in something that makes sense to us and question the belief systems that are imposed upon us. Now, from doing this, I find what is the most fundamental, what I think and I trust the most, comes down to consciousness and sacred geometry. That is what I trust the most. Of anything that could be going on, I trust consciousness and sacred geometry. Now, I have a longer version of this video that explains it all. I have another video titled Fine-Tune Universe and Consciousness, where I talk about all this too. I want to make this short. So, I think consciousness is important because consciousness is what we feel, it's what we experience, it's what we are. Consciousness is what the universe feels and experiences and what it is. What matters to the universe? Consciousness. So this idea that consciousness is just some byproduct of the brain without any causal efficacy of its own, well, I think that's a perspective that we cannot trust. I think that's a bunch of bullshit. All right, and that's the mainstream scientific philosophical perspective. It's one interpretation of philosophical understanding of science. It's a paradigm of science, okay? It's not just what science says, no, okay? And I highly recommend you look into Nassim Haramein's holographic fractal unified physics model. I think that is the most robust and sophisticated scientific cosmological understanding out there. I highly recommend you look into that. And that is the basis of consciousness and sacred geometry. That's why I trust that model the most of any of them, because I think it has to come down to consciousness and sacred geometry. Consciousness because that's what we are, what we feel, what we experience. That's what matters to us. I can question everything in the world altogether, but I really know that consciousness is what's real. That's what matters. That's what's real to me. That's all I really know exists. So you're trying to have a paradigm that tries to say that consciousness is just this epiphenomenon of the matter and, of the brain and there's no free will. Well, you know what? I think that's bullshit. All right? And I don't trust that when you're trying to tell me I'm not a free and independent conscious agent to be able to cause action in my environment. I think it's very manipulative that they teach us, and I think it is an incredibly stupid fundamental view. And that is what they teach in the schools. It's bullshit, guys. Okay. Now, I think the fundamental religious premises are bullshit, too. It's not just one or the other. And it's kind of interesting that it's working out that way. They're trying to pin it against one or the other when they're both wrong. Now, there's interesting aspects of both of them, because I don't think it's just working through consciousness without some mathematical basis. That's why I think it comes down to sacred geometry. That if it's working on this mathematical basis, it should work based on this fundamental geometric mathematical basis of relationships of force vectors. That's what makes the most sense. So the idea that it's working just through arbitrary physical laws without a real good explanation of why they would exist, no, that doesn't make sense. It should work through this sacred geometry. That's what makes the most sense to me. We need a philosophy rooted in consciousness and sacred geometry. Now, what gets interesting is our ancient ancestors had this perspective that is evident in the philosophies they talked about. In some of them, there's Hermeticism, there's the Vedic traditions. They had this. We also have the evidence through the massive megalithic structures that are built all around the planet. That they weren't just primitive people that were just stupid and used primitive tools. They must have had a profound understanding of consciousness and sacred geometry to be able to build these structures, and that's why they built these structures, because they understood the relationship between the geometry of the earth and of what they build and consciousness. So they built it to help raise their consciousness because they knew that consciousness is what matters. Consciousness is what matters to the universe. We want to help build conscious and a conscious understanding, and it works through these energy and information exchange. That the universe isn't just a physical system interacting through physical laws, but it's an information processing system. And it works through this information, which comes down to these fundamental states of geometry, from what I found, and that it's working through this information processing, through this energy and information exchange, through this feedback loop. Very important stuff. This is what's fundamental. This is what we want to get down to, and this is for some reason not being taught in our schools. Very suspicious. Okay, but it connects back to this ancient understanding. And our schools aren't teaching this kind of ancient understanding, and they're just trying to teach that these people were primitive, and we had this linear progression, and that they weren't as advanced and had this understanding of consciousness and sacred geometry. And then you can also see how these people in the ancient past talked about these beings from the sky, these gods. What were they? Why do they talk about all this stuff? Were they just making all of this up? Well, I don't think so. I mean, considering that they were very smart people and were able to build all these megalithic structures with this profound precision, which we could not replicate very easily today, I don't know. I think they maybe were telling us the truth about some of this stuff. Very interesting. We need to look into this and take this into account. Okay. And why aren't they teaching us this in schools? Okay, and I think it comes down to certain extraterrestrials that, I'm trying to make this short and sweet. Look at all of my other videos if you want a longer explanation of this. So certain extraterrestrials that some of them want us to have this knowledge of consciousness and sacred geometry so that we can understand and try to build this understanding to raise our consciousness to a higher level so that we can feel better, so the universe can feel better. Some of them don't want us to have this understanding. That's the basis of this whole conspiracy, is these beings that don't want us to have this understanding of consciousness, that don't want us to be able to understand that we're not just this physical body in this physical world, but we are immersed in this information exchange, information processing universe of this fractal and holographic network. They don't want us to understand the bigger picture of what's going on, about how we are a system of feedback loop within a fractal and holographic network. For some reason, they don't want to understand this, and they want to keep us in this lower vibrational energy state, this lower consciousness. Somehow they benefit from that. And so that's the basis of this whole conspiracy and why they're doing all this, and it's been going on for thousands of years. One of the ways they do this is they have these families which say they have certain ties, certain bloodlines, which tie back to the gods, the aliens. Okay, that's what they say. And then, there's other secret societies which are holding this occult knowledge, which comes down to all this stuff. This esoteric philosophy. It all connects back to the consciousness and sacred geometry. And I know that's what's fundamental. That's the way this has to work. Okay? And so, that's the basis of all this. And then these people, these families and secret societies, they do some weird stuff to try to control the different sectors of our society, to try to control this, to keep this knowledge and information away from us, to keep us down in these lower energy states, this lower consciousness. Okay, to keep us stupid, dumbed down, to keep our, basically do all that to us. And that's what they're trying to do. They put things in our water, fluoride in the water, and, other things in our food system, and the whole paradigm of understanding, they try to keep us in this philosophical understanding which doesn't grasp the whole big picture of what's really going on here. Okay? And so, these families and secret societies are helping do this and helping establish this controlled network on the earth to keep us away from this knowledge, to keep us in this lower consciousness, lower vibrational energy states. Okay? And so, these people also, right now, certain sectors of society they're trying to control. They're trying to control the media. They're trying to control the governments by their infiltration of these certain sectors, trying to control these major companies to try to control the world and try to take over. And they're trying to create a further control over the world to make sure we don't get to this knowledge of sacred geometry and consciousness and to connect and sort of raise our consciousness to that level. For some reason, they don't want us to be able to do that. Okay? And so they want to keep us in this lower vibrational energy state. And I want you to check out my video Beyond the Conspiracy, where I talk about how this is really all a process of the universe understanding itself and coming to this understanding itself. And this is really all of a catalyst, and it's just a fun game the universe is playing with itself to get into and learn about what it is. And this isn't just some scary thing about aliens and they're going to hurt us all. No, it's just the spiritual journey of the universe. Okay, but it's still happening and we want to stop it. Yeah. So these people, they also, these families, secret societies, do these heinous acts to children. All part of this weird scheme of blackmail to try to control different sectors of society of different people. And then they also perform these sacrifices on these ancient sacred sites, which has to do with the energy dynamics of the earth, the sacred geometry of how the earth is playing out, and creates these nodes like ley lines on the earth, intersection of ley lines on the earth. Creates, that's why they had these sacred sites, why they built these ancient megalithic structures on these sacred sites, because they understood the sacred geometry and the connection between that and consciousness, and trying to build the consciousness and the connection between that and the earth, and how the earth is a living being, and trying to establish all that and the harmony and coherence and how it all works. They had this basic understanding in the past, and then we lost that understanding, and they try to keep us away from that. These certain beings and families and secret societies try to keep us away from that understanding. That's the basis of the whole conspiracy. That's what it is, I think. I mean, I'm pretty sure. So, and I've looked into this quite a bit. I don't know if you can tell. But, so they're doing this to us. And as I say, they've performed heinous acts of children, and they're trying to control different sectors of our society to keep us away from this knowledge, to keep us in this lower vibrational energy state, to keep us separated, and to keep us away from fully grasping what's actually going on here. This is the basis of all the lies and information in our societies, to keep us away from this understanding. I'm quite sure that this is happening through an infiltration of different aspects of in America, different aspects of the government, through both the Democratic and Republican sides, and through the media, for sure. It's ever trying to control the information. So it's ever controlling the schools. It's ever controlling the religions. It's ever controlling the media. And we got these big tech companies too. They're a large controller of information. And so we can't trust them either. So whatever the system is, conspiracy is, it comes down to people trying to keep us away in this limited understanding of the universe and what it is. They're trying to keep us away from that in this lower energy state, so that we don't fully realize how we're immersed within a fractal holographic energy field. And they want us to think that what's going on is we're just separate bits of matter, and that our consciousness is just an epiphenomenon of the matter. Well, that's not what's happening here at all, and that's what the science actually suggests, but they feed you bullshit science so that you don't really get it. Okay, yeah. And so it's working through that. And they're trying to control different sectors of our society. They perform heinous acts on children as part of this whole operation. They do all other kinds of stuff, but, with different drug trafficking too and all this other stuff. But, it's controlling the information is the biggest part. Keeping us away from the philosophy is the biggest part. And that's how I got interested in all this as a philosopher. Okay? And so that's what they're trying to do to us. And it's not very nice. Whatever they're doing it for, it's just not nice. And we want to stop them, and we don't want them to do this to us anymore. Okay, so now where it gets weird is, so who exactly these people are, why they're doing it. Okay, but, I think they're doing it trying to control the different sectors, the media, the massive companies, the governments. That's why they're doing this. It doesn't have to be this way. This whole idea, look, throughout our history, there's governments that are corrupt and trying to control people, control their information. It doesn't have to be this way. Why is it like this? Okay. So, because it's these aliens that are trying to control our minds. That's what I think is happening. And I've looked into this a lot. It's not like I'm just stupid and just read one of these things one day and was just convinced. No. Okay, but, so, the sacred geometry and consciousness. If that's not the fundamental aspect of understanding, then you're not going to get all of this. Because you didn't try to really work it out and figure it out. I'm just saying, I think you're smart, but did you? If you don't think it comes down to consciousness and sacred geometry, whatever. All right, I think it does. And now you know, and now you can look into this. Okay, sweet, cool. So then, where it gets weird, where it gets really weird. Okay, so there's different people, family, secret societies, whatever they are, different people working, part of this whole alien network trying to control us and keep us in this limited energy state, lower vibrational consciousness. Okay? Other people have figured this out too. And they figure this out, and they have positions of power, and they need to figure out how to stop this. But, when you're part of a network that doesn't really give a fuck and will just kill people that try to stop you, it's not so easy. So what apparently might have happened here is that after the CIA killed John F. Kennedy, or wherever, this network that's trying to control and take over the world and kind of keep us in this lower consciousness, killed Kennedy. Not really the guy, whatever. you know. So they killed Kennedy, and then apparently the people in the military are like, yo, what is up? We need to stop them, like for real. And then, but it's not just that easy to stop them. So they form this alliance so that they can try to stop this network from further taking over the world, further and performing these actions on children. Trying to do all this, okay? And they formed all this, and then it's part of like a military operation. This then eventually evolved. And they got Donald Trump to run for president. I know that part sounds crazy to you. That, and this is the basis of Q. That, that is a military operation that started when Kennedy was killed, then trying to take down this network of people that are performing heinous acts on children. They're further trying to take over the world, all as part of working for these extraterrestrial beings that want to keep us on this lower vibrational energy state, this lower consciousness. I think that's what it comes down to. So they're trying to do all this to us. And, well, these beings, these people, these families and secret societies trying to take over all these sectors, and they've done it by controlling the media, they've done it by controlling these massive companies, they've done it by infiltrating the governments. And so those entities we cannot trust. And then what's allegedly happening here with the Q operation is that there's a fraction of the military, there's two sides of the military-industrial complex, the war-hungry monsters, obviously the bad guys, and then the good guys that have figured it out and are trying to stop the bad guys, and then, but, it's not just so easy, right? And so they have formed this alliance and are trying to do this and have gotten Trump into the office of presidency and have worked it. And that's why Trump ran for president. Everything comes back to this. It all comes back to stopping this network, stopping these people from further trying to take over the world, stopping them from abusing the children and all the other weird stuff they do, which is a huge deal, guys. And so I think that's the basis of this whole Q operation, is to stop these people. Here's the thing. Maybe this whole Q thing is more information from these people. I don't know. But before you really try to understand whether or not it is, you have to grasp that all this is happening, that there is this New World Order plot, that there are these people abusing children, and how it connects all to consciousness and sacred geometry. That's where you need to start. Consciousness and sacred geometry. And then you can go and see the connection to the ancient past and how they had that connection. And then you can go and see the connection to the ancient terrestrials. And then you can see the connection between why they're trying to keep us away from that for whatever reason. And the connection between how they've infiltrated governments and tried to control the people so that they don't reach this understanding. It's all very clear once you've been studying it for like 10 years. This is what's going on. And so maybe the Q operation's fake, but before you really try to understand that, you have to get the consciousness and sacred geometry, how it connects to the ancient past, how it connects to the extraterrestrials and these families and secret societies that are trying to do this to us. I mean, and before, you have to get that first. And it's just a big deal. And so, that's where we really need to focus on, the consciousness and sacred geometry. That's what I think is fundamental. Everything else can be lies, but I know that's what makes sense to me. So our understanding has to be rooted in that. And so from there, and then that's what we need to work on. Whether this Q operation is real or not, we need to focus on the consciousness and sacred geometry. It's so important. But I think, I'm optimistic that this Q operation is real, and that means there's a group of good people trying to take them down. And look, if the craziest part to you is Donald Trump and not the aliens that are trying to steal our souls, so to speak, I mean, come on. Aliens trying to steal our souls. Donald Trump. I mean, it could happen. It's like, it's no way it's Donald Trump. It's like, well, do you understand what's going on with the aliens? No. Well, that's because then you don't understand what's really happening here. So in order to understand what's really happening here, I highly recommend you focus on consciousness and sacred geometry first. That's what we have to get at before we understand what's really going on with this whole Q operation. And I'm optimistic that it'll be successful, but if it's not, I don't know what we're going to do. We still have a lot of work to do because I still think these people are doing crazy things and trying to further take over the world, and that's a problem. So we need to figure out how to not let that happen. But I'm pretty confident this Q operation is legit, and they're going to do and arrest these people. They're going to expose this, and then we'll have to focus on building a philosophy of consciousness and sacred geometry and connecting spiritually, and we'll all start a new spiritual awakening and a new path of a spiritual journey to keep advancing along the different densities and dimensions of consciousness. Because that's all part of it, is a universal journey of discovering itself through the different dimensions and densities of consciousness. It's all a game the universe made up and is playing for itself for fun to discover itself about what's really going on and what it is and what it can be. So it's all pretty cool. It's just very different from what they're trying to make us think it is, though, that's for sure.